If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and we have finally arrived at the final review I am doing for 2022. I was supposed to have posted this video yesterday, but I ended up getting swarmed with family reunions, doing the Fortnite event, and then the podcast last night, so I didn't get time to check out this album until this morning. And finally, I'm here to talk about, and that is the latest album from Australian Blackened speed thrash metal legends, Destroyer 666, with Never Surrender. So this is the 6th studio album from Destroyer 666, which came out on December 2nd, 2022. Man, I can't believe the year's almost over already, which is insane, but regardless. So yeah, checking out this album, as I really liked their last album, which came out in 2016, and I forget the name, Wildfire, that's what it was. Wildfire, and I was a pretty big fan of that album when it came out, despite the fact that I haven't really gone back to it since. But here we are with a new album, and this was kind of an out-of-nowhere release, because typically I don't review albums past the final week of November, but when I saw that this was coming out on the 2nd of December, it was like, I'll squeeze this one in just because I really liked the last album, Wildfire, so I figured, why not check out the new one? And here we are with Never Surrender. So, first thing right out of the gate I want to say is, holy crap, do these riffs feel old school as hell? And I'll talk more in depth about it when we get there. We start off with the title track, Never Surrender, and it immediately gets into a cool guitar line that almost made me think immediately of Painkiller by Judas Priest. And I love how that vibe even continues throughout while maintaining that, like, Blackened speed vibe that they're known for. And I love even the little cool pinch harmonics that you get on this track as well. But then as we move along in the album, one of the big influences you're going to hear pretty much on, like, the majority of these songs is Judas Priest worship. Like, holy crap, a lot of these songs have a lot of moments that remind me of Judas Priest. Like I said, the title track very much opens up similar to Painkiller by Judas Priest with that cool guitar riff. And then you get into other tracks that maintains a little bit of that Judas Priest vibe, songs like Guillotine, as well as Pitch Black Night, Mirror's Edge. All those songs just really encapsulate a lot of Judas Priest influence in the riff writing department. So you can definitely tell this band loves their Judas Priest, and why the hell not? Judas Priest fucking rules. But then you hear other band influences kind of sneak their way into the music on a couple of tracks in particular, songs like Andraste, as well as Rather Death, or no, not Rather Death, what am I talking about? Savage Rights, that's the song. So those two songs bring in a little bit of Morbid Angel influence, mainly in these little tremolo riffs and tremolo melodies. You get a little bit of that, like, Morbid Angel worship, and almost kind of reminded me a little bit of the Nocturnal Graves album that came out all the way back in January, which is another Australian band with former members of Destroyer 666. So kind of an interesting parallel there, I would say. But yeah, those two songs do bring in a little bit of, like, a Morbid Angel vibe to it. But then you get more songs on here that just showcase, again, even more band influence, like Andraste, as well as even Rather Death, and now we talk about Rather Death. Like, those two songs, you get instances of an Iron Maiden gallop going on, which is so cool whenever I hear any metal band do an Iron Maiden gallop, because after all, Maiden was the band that kind of invented that kind of galloping rhythm in a song with the riff structure as well as the beats. And the fact that Destroyer 666 do them, and do it very well with their own spin to it, with that, like, aggressive Blackened feel to it. It's really, really nice to hear. But then as we keep going, again, we get even more band influence coming in, mainly in tracks like Guillotine and Grave Raiders. Those two songs remind me a lot of Metallica in the riff writing. Like, hell, even in the song Guillotine, there's a riff that comes in on the bridge that almost feels like Destroyer 666 doing their version of the song Creeping Death in that classic riff where they go, "Die by my hand." That fucking riff right there on the bridge on the breakdown. It's like, wow, Guillotine does a cool job at playing that riff on the bridge, but doing it in their own way. And then meanwhile, with Grave Raiders, immediately the opening riff takes me to a Metallica-like place, but with a cool, almost power metal melodic lead line that sits on top. But that Metallica worship even continues on top of a D beat. And I love the little melodic lead lines you get in the choruses on Grave Raiders, but also like how occasionally that riff crawls a little bit. But yeah, about half of this album, maybe half or a little more than half, you get some really effective tremolo riffs that really bring out that black metal side of Destroyer 666's sound, which I know I talk a lot about whenever a band hangs on tremolo riffs for far too long and for too much on an album, it can kind of lose me. But this band knows how to do tremolo riffs and not get too overindulgent with it, and make it effective and serve that part of the song quite well. But yeah, and then we get back into more talking about some of the tracks, like also getting back to the song Guillotine, like the little melodic progressions that you get with that opening riff that brings in a little mixture of Metallica, Judas Priest, and even a little bit of Slayer. It then turns into like a riff that reminds me of Motorhead's Overkill. And even in the drums, that double bass and the D beat on top, this made me think, is this Destroyer 666 doing an homage to Motorhead? But it also has a little bit of moments that remind me of Midnight. Like, even in the vocals, a good chunk of the vocals on here are just so aggressive, they kind of remind me a little bit of bands like Midnight, but then occasionally you get, like, the little more shrieky vocals here and there on the album. And I love, like, the melodies that you get on here, whether it's in the leads or even in some of the riffs where they get a little more melodic. Like, Pitch Black Night begins with a dark riff that more or less helps build a mood before it gets into, like, that tremolo insanity. And then we get to the closing tracks, like I said, with Rather Death. It starts off with tension building with a bit of a doom march, while you have tremolo riffs on top before it turns thrashy and aggressive. But then we get to the closing track, Batavia's Graveyard. Starts off with some dark, clean guitars, and it ends up just being there to build atmosphere. And then you get into a groove that reminds me a little bit of Danzig, a little bit, like it's bluesy, but on top of that groove, you get riff writing that reminds me a lot of Dissection's Where Dead Angels Lie. It's like those kind of riffs on top of like a bluesy Danzig drum groove. And didn't really talk about the leads on here. Pretty much the lead work on this album was just mostly about shredding your face off, like it's face-melting shred. But then you get leads like on Pitch Black Night, Mirror's Edge, Rather Death, and Batavia's Graveyard. They get more melodic and more feeling going on top, while Andraste, or Andraste, I don't know how to pronounce that stupid word, but that song has a more atmospheric solo laced on top. So we get some diverse lead work, but it is mostly about face-melting shred, which that's what you want out of a thrashy, speedy band like this. Now, the production, it is very, very gritty, which fits for a band of this stature, although I do wish the bass could be more prominent, which is a problem with a lot of albums this year. The bass wasn't quite as forward in the mix as it should, but not too far up front, but just good enough that it's audible on top of the guitars. So that, as well as maybe the only other complaint I could really have about this album, is that this album has a lot of influences being shown on their sleeves, and at times, those influences can be rubbing on that line of it sounding too derivative. And that's sort of a thing whenever you hear a lot of bands trying to do homage to old school metal. It's like, there are bands that will do it very well, and then there are bands that almost feel too much of like a copycat. I haven't come across, at least this year, too much that came off as a copycat. It's just, they rub that line just a little bit to like let you know, yeah, we're playing a riff that feels like something of the past, but it's not a complete and utter copycat. It's done in our own way. But overall, not the strongest Blackened speed thrash album of the year, but still a wild and really good listen. I'm going to give this an 8.5 out of 10. I still think this is a really good and strong album. I will say I'm not sure if it's as good as Wildfire, though I feel this album is a lot different because of that more classic heavy metal flair going on. But this is still a really fun album. I definitely recommend you guys check it out if you haven't already. But that is just my opinion. What do you guys think of Destroyer 666 Never Surrender? Let me know in the comments below, and that was my final review of the year. Won't be back to reviewing albums until January, but yeah, I'm prepping up for the 12 Days of Metal series that's going to start on the 13th, as well as the top 50 album of the year list that will happen Christmas week. So yeah, lots coming up on the channel here very, very soon, so don't forget to subscribe to get all that. And hit the notification bell so you can be notified of what videos come out. But until next time, horns high.
Anything kind of mainstream at the time, if you could say so. Like, you would get Slipknot, System of a Down,
Yes.
and loads of like Sum 41, Linkin Park, and all that kind of stuff.